Hey guys, so I'm in Glen Mills, Pennsylvania. This is in the suburbs of Philadelphia, and I'm here at Rayne. And you may know Rayne as one of those online plant shops, but they actually have physical plant shops too, and Glen Mills is just one of the places that they have it. And I just got here, and it's such a cute little area. This used to be an old farmstead, and they have actually kept some of the buildings, and we're about to walk into the shade house to see what they have in the shop. So welcome to Rayne's. This is their shade greenhouse, and it acts a little bit like a nursery, although they actually do buy plants and they have some here. I don't think they grow any of their own plants. And then they have a shop that's back there that's a little bit more home style and decor, which we may get a chance to go see, but I just kind of want to check out what plants they have. So you can see here that this Crassula, which is a common jade plant, just had been past bloom, which is pretty neat to see. This is a very large Crassula that you could see here. And some of their Sedum. So, and then this is their Dudleas. And this is a Kalanchoe. This is more of their pancake plant. Another Crassula right here. I believe this might be an Echeveria. And another one of their Kalanchoes. This one will actually probably get little babies along the edges, little plantlets that kind of come out, and that's how they self-propagate. And these guys, you could see, they drop their little chubby leaves right here, and each of these will actually become their own little plant. Put that right back in there. So this is a lot of their really nice succulents they have here. Their Clusia that you could see, Clusia rosea. And just in the back, they have a variegated one right over here. These are really beautiful Kalanchoe. I think these are Kalanchoe pumila, if I remember off the top of my head. And you can see they have that really powdery white leaf and a really pretty lavender lilac colored flower. Apuntia sunburst, these are called. So here we have some euphorbias. And this is an Apuntia. This is not the first time I've seen these. Very nice. A number of different assorted succulents if you want to go that route. And then you will see some of the things that are quite popular now. These are formerly known as Senecio radicans, but this one is Curio radicans, string of fishhooks. And this was formerly known as Senecio jacobensii, but now it's a Kleinia. And this one is also string of fishhooks, but you could see how there's different forms and variations. So you see this one is thinner and longer, and this one's a little bit more fat and stout and shorter. String of fishhooks, string of bananas, that's what this one's called. And you can see this is also the same, but look how tiny and small this is. So these are just different variations and forms that have been cultivated. This one actually looks like it's in the same genus, but it's not. You'd be able to tell by their flowers, and you actually could see this. It's called Athona capensis, but it's now in a new genus called Chrysothenna, I believe, Chrysothenna capensis. And this is not in bloom, because this probably bloomed like maybe 2 months ago, but the blooms are actually very different, but they still have, this one's like a little bit more of like a daisy-like flower. This one has a little bit more of like an aster-like flower. This one's called Echeveria. It says devotion, although there's an Echeveria called Pulvinia, I believe, and it might be a cultivated variety of that. Very nice. They had another fuzzy Echeveria down here. Oh, no, it's right here. It's this one. This one's probably a setosa. This one doesn't have a scientific name to it, but setosa, or sometimes another cultivar called Doris Taylor, actually is one of those fuzzy Echeverias. If you don't really give this full top-down light, it's going to start to elongate on you. So you could either kind of cut them back, you know, cut the tops off, let it actually harden off, and then you could plant it again. To keep it staying this cute, you're gonna have to really give it a little bit more top-down light. This is another type of senecio. These are wonderful. They're called blue chalk sticks. Some ripsalis right here. So these are some jungle cactus. This one is really nice. This is a Kleinia. I believe this is now called Kleinia petraea. It used to be known as Senecio jacobensii. And you could see this in this little hanging basket here. They have the Curio radicans. They have some ripsalis pilocarpa. They have some rat tail cactus right here, which I'm not going to lift up with my finger because I'll probably be getting all those glochids in my hands. So this is Hoya sangii. Wow, this one's a really nice plant right here that's growing on this pole. I'm not even sure how much this was going for, but if this was in my neck of the woods, I probably would have purchased it. So I have to highlight some of the Peperomia. And this one's Peperomia dolabriformis. But you could see here what's happening. You can see that this just recently broke off. It has this like rot towards the bottom. And you can see that happening right here too. And what I assume probably what happened with this is that maybe it got too moist down by the roots, and these semi-succulent plants don't need to have a tremendous amount of water, and I think that's one of the big mistakes that we often do with Peperomia. That's why they can be so challenging. And these more succulent ones totally could go with a little bit more water. So when you get these, you often want to change them out of this kind of peaty mixture, try to get some of the peaty mixture off of its roots and get it in a little bit more of a well-draining mixture so this doesn't happen. So if you see this happening, I would either kind of cut it back and let it suberize over or harden off, or even get some of these leaves and get them in here because they will propagate that way as well. Related to that, very similar, is Peperomia ferreyrae. This is also known as green beans peperomia, and you could see that they have also those little windows and those semi-succulent stems. These, as they age, will get really woody. So don't be scared if you start seeing like woody stems growing. If you've had these long enough, they will kind of like harden off. Some asparagus fern. This is, I think, Asparagus densiflorus. Very nice, very nice. Aspleniums, bird's nest ferns. I would say that these are some of the easier ferns that you can manage in your home. So if you're looking for a fern that is a little bit more like non-fussy, I would probably start with this versus like if you go behind here and you see all those beautiful maidenhairs. So these are pretty non-fussy plants, and I would definitely go for this versus maybe a maidenhair fern if you are just new to the keeping ferns indoors. Me and Boston ferns don't necessarily agree, so I would say that, again, maidenhair or these like just actually don't work out as well. Yeah, I mean, I kind of find these ferns just to be a little bit fussier just because they need a little bit more water or care. This one has a little bit thinner leaves. If you don't keep this one happy, it will just like start to drop its leaves pretty quickly and readily. This one will drop its leaves. This one will just actually start to crisp up. But again, there's so many different types of aspleniums, and you can see that this one has a little bit more of like a frilly tops versus this one doesn't. So you could get actually all different types of variations and forms, which are kind of cool. Strelitzias, bird of paradise. So one of the things with strelitzias, they get pretty big, and if they have like light from above, they will grow up. But if you're giving them kind of light from the side, when they get large enough, they will start to dip their heavy stalks and their heavy leaves over. And that could be a problem kind of indoors, because you want to try to, you know, when I had my strelitzia, it was just kind of like toppling over into the room. And so you have this, you want to like kind of contain them, and you wrap rope around them or do whatever. But if you have a skylight, if you're lucky enough to have a skylight, these are great plants to be able to grow and kind of make a little bit more of a statement. Dieffenbachias, dumb canes. These are plants that are notoriously known not to have around pets because they have calcium oxalate crystals that are actually quite toxic. Some people really like them for the spots on the leaves. They have very different cultivars. You can see that this one's very different from this one. Some of them are darker leaf varieties, but they can get very caney, meaning that their stems start to elongate and it doesn't look as pretty. You could always cut those stems back and replant them, but they do require a little bit more maintenance over time. Hoya carnosas, you have some variegated ones and some crimson queens here and just regular Hoya carnosas. Of course, you have this massive philodendron right here. Maybe this is a Bonapartii, I don't know, but it's quite massive. I don't know if they're selling it. So you have another philodendron right here. This is a cultivated variety, I'm not sure which one. Some maidenhair ferns, some ficus right here, and some Jeopartias. So this was formerly known as Calathea zebrina, but I think now this is called Jeopartia zebrina. Very beautiful velvety leaves. And this is a type of cultivar of Jeopartia, but I'm not sure which one. Might be like peacock or something like that. Rhaphidophora tetraspermas, very small versions. You really don't need a big one to start out with. These grow pretty rapidly. And then these are, quite arguably one of the easier plants to grow. I don't think they're quite lookers, like people won't necessarily pick these up. This is called Procris repens. It's formerly known as Paulownia repens. Looks like some of these have gotten like chewed off a little bit. Let's see if I could get a better looking one. Here you go. So they kind of scramble along the ground. I have these in my green wall, and my green wall doesn't always necessarily have the most optimal conditions for a lot of plants, but I found that Procris repens is one of those ones that just is like a total survivor in a lot of locations. And like I said, it maybe doesn't have the kind of growth that people find beautiful, but it could be a great hanging basket plant and something that really scrambles well along the ground. These are more Divalias, which are rabbit's foot ferns. So if I pull that back, you could see some of the little rhizomes right here, little fuzzy rhizomes. These are the heartleaf ferns. I find these a little bit more challenging to grow, unless you're growing them in a terrarium. I think these are called kangaroo paw ferns, but let me see. Yes, these are the kangaroo paw ferns. So you can see they have these types of rhizomes. Actually not so hard of a plant to grow. I found they didn't grow well in my green wall, but you would probably have better luck growing them in a more optimum condition than my green wall. I would say that this is kind of in line with, if I could find one here, Philodendron Autumn, which I'm looking, oh, here they are, right here. These Philodendrons, blue star ferns, I would say they're very similar in care to these, and they are also very, one of the easier ferns to grow indoors. As I had mentioned before, my green wall doesn't have necessarily the most optimum conditions because it kind of like is very wet and it gets really dry sometimes. And so for some plants that are a little bit more sensitive, it's not as good. So if you're growing this outside of a situation like that, and just a regular home, what your regular conditions in your home, that might actually be a little bit easier than say something that I was doing with my green wall. These are all asparagus ferns right here. So you can see all the different types of asparagus ferns. These are the ferns that I would say that you wouldn't want to get dry for too long because they do start to brown their leaves up quite readily. But these will shoot out to be quite large. But if you kind of like forget to water them, they're going to drop their leaves and then they're going to be shedding like sheepdogs. Monstera adansonii, some alocasias, Alocasia amazonicas. Honestly, I think these are like spider mite heaven for me. Like every time I brought one in, it got spider mites and there's like really nothing you could do about it. Philodendrons, and these are Stromanthes. So this is the Stromanthe triostar, which is a type of cultivar, and you can see that it has these variegations and these kind of lovely pink-red aubergine leaves. And then you could see that this is the regular version where they have the purplish red aubergine undersides and the dark green tops. So these are Saxifraga stoloniferas. They're often called like strawberry begonias, but they're not a begonia. And they send out these little runners with little plantlets at the base. You could see one that I just pulled off here. Right here, you can see the little leaves coming off, and that's actually how they propagate. And these make actually really beautiful hanging basket plants. And then you'll see some peperomias here, and also here. Some are in bloom. Right here as well. Peperomia rosso is a popular one. Some more peperomias right here, Peperomia caparatas. And then right here in the middle is the aluminum plant, different genus altogether. They're called pileas. So you can see how beautiful they are. These are all very good understory plants. So, see, this was like the little Gesneriaceae corner. So we have some variegated leaves of some Streptocarpus. They still call them St. Paulias. They're African violets. But you can see some are actually in bloom now. There's so many different cultivars and varieties of African violets. These have been cultivated for a very long time. Of course, you got your Phalaenopsis orchids, some begonias happening here. And then this is Podocarpus, and I actually have not had the pleasure of growing these plants. There's actually a nice tree back here that you could see. And I think this could give you a nice alternative, like if you're not like feeling like you want to grow a Ficus lyrata or some type of fig in your house, or a Ficus elastica, that you might be able to get away with a Podocarpus. What I like about this is it kind of gives a little bit more of like a conifer type of look. So like, you know, most of us can't grow spruce or pine indoors, but this kind of gives a little bit more of that coniferous type of look versus like Ficus lyrata, which is right behind here, which is like this more bigger, broader leaf tree that you most often see with like an oak outdoors, you know, this broader leaf, flatter leaf. And this to me looks a little bit more like a conifer, which I think is pretty cool. This back here, so this is often known as Philodendron micans, but it's a Philodendron heteroecium. And sometimes you would maybe consider the cultivar name micans, but this has a little bit more of a velvety leaf sheen. My experience with growing this is after it grows out quite a lot, it starts to look less velvety and looks like a regular Philodendron heteroecium leaf, like nothing as spectacular. So when it's like small like this, it's kind of like cute and velvety, but it doesn't always stay cute and velvety. What else can I show you? Okay, so this looks like a Philodendron jungle boogie to me, but it could just be like a Philodendron, yes, it says Philodendron jungle boogie. I've seen some that are called Philodendron narrow. They look very similar. And again, my experience of growing this is it kind of stays a little bit more of this like bird's nest shape, whereas a lot of philodendrons, like this one, so this is Philodendron burle-marxii. You see how this is growing right here? It gets this kind of like gangly appearance and it gets these aerial roots. This would make a really good trellised plant. Otherwise, it'll start to kind of scramble. And I can't trellis all my plants, so sometimes I just let my philodendrons scramble. But if you're letting a lot of your philodendrons scramble when they really want to be climbing up, just keep in mind that some of their leaves will start to get a little bit smaller and smaller. So if you give it something to trellis up on, oftentimes that's when you start to get the larger leaves. Some people who want like big statement plants, especially like sitting down on their ground, then you could go with like a Thaumatophyllum like Xanadu like this, or of course the Monstera deliciosas, which you could also start to trellis up. We had to skip the snake plants, but you could see that there is some really nice varieties here. You have one that has a little bit more of a rounder shaped leaf, a thicker shaped leaf, and then you have some that are more like the Trifasciata, This looks like Bantel's Sensation, but it has this kind of grayish green foliage. And of course, like, you can't go wrong with like plants that are 50% off. So maybe these have like sit in the store for too long, but these are types of plants that you could take. Like this primulina looks like really nice. These get really pretty flowers. And if you could, you know, take this home for 50% off and you want to like nurse it back to health, like that's kind of awesome. Same thing, you know, with this maidenhair fern. I think this is why a lot of people don't go with the maidenhair fern, because after a while it starts to look a certain way. This one looks like it almost got too much water at one point, but the leaves start to crisp up like this. But my experience with maidenhair is that you could actually cut back all of this, and usually the root system, if it's not rotted out, will be good enough so that it actually starts to replenish and rejuvenate itself. It just takes a little bit more time. And if you look behind, a lot of us love growing citrus indoors. It's hard to grow in the Northern Hemisphere. It smells delicious. So I don't personally like to grow citrus indoors because it's so hard during the winter months and I don't have a patio to take it out on. But if you have a patio in an outdoor place and you could give it enough light in winter, then growing citrus is actually not going to be as challenging. But you can see that this one is it's quite a happy camper, and it has a little bit more variegated leaves, as you can see here. This is what commonly happens to citrus, is it starts to get you know, leaves that are a little bit more yellow and will fall off. And this is common if it happens in the winter months where the light starts to wane a little bit, or if you're not feeding it enough of nutrients, start to get a little chlorotic. Let's go down this way. So back here, it looks like where they actually do a lot of the potting up for terrain, which is quite neat. It's a nice little workbench. A lot of inspiration for if I ever get my own workbench. So these are fishtail palms. I can't remember the scientific name off the top of my head, but my knowledge is limited on these, but I do believe that these are one of the easier palms to actually grow indoors, and they're readily accessible too. So if you had to go for like a majesty palm or one of these, then I would probably try to opt for one of these. These are some Aralias, which is quite nice. Let's see. You like a little bit more of that leaf structure, really dark colored leaves. And this is a Philodendron hederaceum. So this is, if you remember the micans that I showed you earlier with the velvety leaves, this is also the same species, but you can see it's a little less velvety. Maidenhair ferns, again, are so beautiful. People love them because of the like wispy leaves, the way that they look, the textures. You can see that this one is a much more smaller leaved variety of adiantum. But like I said, very challenging to grow for some people if you're forgetting to water them. I like to grow mine, especially if they're a little bit bigger, on hydrospikes. And I talk about like watering hacks. But having these with a little bit more of a constant source of water is going to be probably better for them. But again, how could we not want to at least try them once in our lives? They're too beautiful. These are Tradescantias, inch plants. I mean, sometimes they're called wandering Jews, but these are very easy to grow. And the experience is if you have them in a greenhouse, you probably don't want to plant them because they just kind of spread all over and they take over everything. So adorable. So these are some Marantas, and I actually just did a video on how to propagate some members of the prayer plant family, specifically their cousins of the Tenanthes. But you can see that they have different cultivated varieties here. So you have one with white veins, and you have one with red veins. And these will actually start to drape down a little bit. Very wonderful plants to grow. A little less harder than the calatheas / Dupertias, which are these are super susceptible to anything like fluoride or chlorine in your water, so they start to get brown around the tips if they don't have enough humidity. There's a lot of things that will make these plants look bad very quickly. So you want to be a little bit more mindful with what you get, and I would opt a little bit more for a Maranta than I would with Calathea / Dupertia. Well, I think we've pretty much covered a lot of what I'm seeing here at Rayne. Again, cute little shop. I wish we could actually go out and explore a little bit more. They have like an old historic mushroom house and a bunch of other things. But I hope that gave you a little good look of what's happening here in Glen Mills in Pennsylvania. All right, guys, I'm gonna get some plants and I'll see you later.